So hello friends, in this video we are going to read chapter 4 of the class 10th civics book, which is titled as Gender, Religion and Caste. So let's start. First of all, overview. In the previous chapter we noted that the existence of social diversity does not threaten democracy. Political expression of social differences is possible and sometimes quite desirable in a democratic system. In this chapter, we apply these ideas to the practice of democracy in India. We look at three kinds of social differences that can take the form of social divisions and inequalities. These are social differences based on gender, religion, and caste. In each case, we look at the nature of this division in India and how it gets expressed in politics. We also ask whether different expressions based on these differences are healthy or otherwise in a democracy. So let's start the chapter. First of all, gender and politics. Let us begin with gender division. This is a form of hierarchy social division seen everywhere, but is rarely recognized in the study of politics. The gender division tends to be understood as natural and unchangeable. However, it is not based on biology but on social expectations and stereotypes. Have a look at the glossary. Sexual division of labor. A system in which all work inside the home is either done by the women of the family or organized by them through the domestic helpers. Now, public or private division. Boys and girls are brought up to believe that the main responsibility of women is housework and bringing up children. This is reflected in a sexual division of labor in most families. Women do all work inside the home such as cooking, cleaning, washing clothes, tailoring, looking after children, etc. and men do all the work outside the home. It is not that men cannot do housework. They simply think that it is for women to attend to these things. When these jobs are paid for, men are ready to take up these works. Most tailors or cooks in hotels are men. Similarly, it is not that women do not work outside their home. In villages, women fetch water, collect fuel and work in the fields. In urban areas, poor women work as domestic helper in middle-class homes, while middle-class women work in offices. In fact, the majority of women do some sort of paid work in addition to domestic labor, but their work is not valued and does not get recognition. The result of this division of labor is that although women constitute half of the humanity, their role in public life, especially politics, is minimal in most societies. Earlier, only men were allowed to participate in public affairs, vote and contest for public offices. Gradually, the gender issue was raised in politics. Women in different parts of the world organized and agitated for equal rights. There were agitations in different countries for the extension of voting rights to women. These agitations demanded enhancing the political and legal status of women and improving their educational and career opportunities. More radical women's movements aimed at equality in personal and family life as well. These movements are called feminist movements. Political expression of gender division and political mobilization on this question helped to improve women's role in public life. We now find women working as scientists, doctors, engineers, lawyers, managers, and college and university teachers, which were earlier not considered suitable for women. In some parts of the world, for example, in Scandinavian countries such as Sweden, Norway, and Finland, the participation of women in public life is very high. In our country, women still lag much behind men despite some improvement since independence. Ours is still a male-dominated, patriarchal society. Women face disadvantage, discrimination, and oppression in various ways. Number 1. The literacy rate among women is only 54% compared with 76% among men. Similarly, a smaller proportion of girl students go for higher studies. When we look at school results, girls perform as well as boys, if not better in some places. But they drop out because parents prefer to spend their resources for their boys' education rather than spending equally on their sons and daughters. Next, no wonder the proportion of women among the highly paid and valued jobs is still very small. On average, an Indian woman works 1 hour more than an average man every day. Yet, much of her work is not paid and therefore often not valued. Next is the Equal Remuneration Act 1976 provides that equal wages should be paid to equal work. However, in almost all areas of work, from sports and cinema or to factories and fields, women are paid less than men, even when both do exactly the same work. Next, in many parts of India, parents prefer to have sons and find ways to have the girl child aborted before she is born. Such sex-selective abortion led to a decline in child sex ratio, number of girl children per thousand boys in the country to merely 914, as the map shows. This ratio has fallen below 850 or even 800 in some places. There are reports of various kinds of harassment, exploitation, and violence against women. Urban areas have become particularly unsafe for women. They are not safe even within their own home from beating, harassment, and other forms of domestic violence. Now, women's political representation. All this is well known, yet issues related to women's well-being or otherwise are not given adequate attention. This has led many feminist and women's movements to the conclusion that unless women control power, their problems will not get adequate attention. One way to ensure this is to have more women as elected representatives. In India, the proportion of women in legislature has been very low. For example, the percentage of elected women members in Lok Sabha has crossed 10% of its total strength for the first time in 2009. Their share in the state assemblies is less than 5%. In this respect, India is among the bottom group of nations in the world. India is behind the averages for several developing countries of Africa and Latin America. In the government, cabinets are largely all male even when a woman becomes the chief minister or the prime minister. One way to solve this problem is to make it legally binding to have a fair proportion of women in the elected bodies. This is what the Panchayati Raj has done in India. 1/3 of seats in local government bodies, in panchayats and municipalities are now reserved for women. Now there are more than 10 lakh elected women representatives in rural and urban local bodies. Women's organizations and activists have been demanding a similar reservation of at least 1/3 of seats in the Lok Sabha and state assemblies for women. And as you know, this has been granted. This bill has been passed and it has become a law. A bill with this proposal has been pending before the parliament for more than a decade, but there is no consensus over this among all the political parties. The bill has not been passed. But now the bill has been passed. Gender division is an example that some form of social division needs to be expressed in politics. This also shows that disadvantaged groups do benefit when social divisions become a political issue. Do you think that women could have made the gains we noted above if their unequal treatment was not raised in the political domain? Now, religion, communalism, and politics. Let us now turn to a very different kind of social division. The division based on religious differences. This division is not as universal as gender, but religious diversity is fairly widespread in the world today. Many countries, including India, have in their population followers of different religions, as we noticed in the case of Northern Ireland. Even when most of the people belong to the same religion, there can be serious differences about the way people practice that religion. Unlike gender differences, the religious differences are often expressed in the field of politics. Consider the following. Gandhiji used to say that religion can never be separated from politics. What he meant by religion was not any particular religion like Hinduism or Islam, but moral values that inform all religions. He believed that politics must be guided by ethics drawn from religion. Human rights groups in our country have argued that most of the victims of communal riots in our country are people from religious minorities. They have demanded that the government take special steps to protect religious minorities. Women's movement has argued that family laws of all religions discriminate against women. So they have demanded that government should change these laws to make them more equitable. All these instances involve a relationship between religion and politics. But they do not seem very wrong or dangerous. Ideas, ideals, and values drawn from different religions can and perhaps should play a role in politics. People should be able to express in politics their needs, interests, and demands. As a member of a religious community, those who hold political power should sometimes be able to regulate the practice of religion so as to prevent discrimination and oppression. These political acts are not wrong as long as they treat every religion equally. Now, communalism. The problem begins when religion is seen as the basis of the nation. The example of Northern Ireland in chapter 3 shows the dangers of such an approach to nationalism. The problem becomes more acute when religion is expressed in politics in exclusive and partisan terms, when one religion and its followers are pitted against another. This happens when beliefs of one religion are presented as superior to those of other religions. When the demands of one religious group are formed in opposition to another and when state power is used to establish domination of one religious group over the rest. This manner of using religion in politics is communal politics. Communal politics is based on the idea that religion is the principal basis of social community. Communalism involves thinking along the following lines. The followers of a particular religion must belong to one community. Their fundamental interests are the same. Any difference that they may have is irrelevant or trivial for community life. It also follows that people who follow different religions cannot belong to the same social community. If the followers of different religions have some commonalities, these are superficial and immaterial. Their interests are bound to be different and involve a conflict. In its extreme form, communalism leads to the belief that people belonging to different religions cannot live as equal citizens within one nation. Either one of them has to dominate the rest or they have to form different nations. This belief is fundamentally flawed. People of one religion do not have the same interests and aspirations in every context. Everyone has several other roles in positions and identities. There are many voices inside every community. All these voices have a right to be heard. Therefore, any attempt to bring all followers of one religion together in context other than religion is bound to suppress many voices within that community. Communalism can take various forms in politics. The first one, the most common expression of communalism is in everyday beliefs. These routinely involve religious prejudices, stereotypes of religious communities, and belief in the superiority of one's religion over other religions. This is so common that we often fail to notice it even when we believe in it. Next, a communal mind often leads to a quest for political dominance of one's own religious community. For those belonging to majority community, this takes the form of majoritarian dominance. For those belonging to the minority community, it can take the form of a desire to form a separate political unit. Next, political mobilization on religious lines is another frequent form of communalism. This involves the use of sacred symbols, religious leaders, emotional appeal, and plain fear in order to bring the followers of one religion together in the political arena. In electoral politics, this often involves special appeal to the interest or emotions of voters of one religion in preference to others. Next, sometimes communalism takes its most ugly form of communal violence, riots and massacre. India and Pakistan suffered some of the worst communal riots at the time of the partition. The post-independence period has also seen large-scale communal violence. Now, secular state. Communalism was and continues to be one of the major challenges to democracy in our country. The makers of our constitution were aware of this challenge. That is why they chose the model of a secular state. This choice was reflected in several constitutional provisions that we studied last year. There is no official religion for the Indian state. Unlike the status of Buddhism in Sri Lanka, that of Islam in Pakistan, and that of Christianity in England, or our constitution does not give a special status to any religion. The Constitution provides to all individuals and communities freedom to profess, practice, and propagate any religion or not to follow any. The Constitution prohibits discrimination on grounds of religion. At the same time, the Constitution allows the state to intervene in the matters of religion in order to ensure equality within religious communities. For example, it bans untouchability. Understood in this sense, secularism is not just an ideology of some parties or persons. This idea constitutes one of the foundations of our country. Communalism should not be seen as a threat to some people in India. It threatens the very idea of India. That is why communalism needs to be combated. A secular constitution like ours is necessary but not sufficient to combat communalism. Communal prejudices and propaganda need to be countered in everyday life, and religion-based mobilization needs to be countered in the arena of politics. Now, caste and politics. We have seen two instances of the expression of social divisions in the arena of politics, one largely positive and the other largely negative. Let us turn to our final case, that of caste and politics, that has both positive and the negative aspects. Now, caste inequalities. Unlike gender and religion, caste division is special to India. All societies have some kind of social inequality and some form of division of labor. In most societies, occupations are passed on from one generation to another. Caste system is an extreme form of this. What makes it different from other societies is that In this system, hereditary occupational division was sanctioned by rituals. Members of the same caste group were supposed to form a social community that practiced the same or similar occupation, married within the caste group, and did not eat with members from other caste groups. Caste system was based on exclusion of and discrimination against the outcast groups. They were subjected to the inhuman practice of untouchability about which you have studied in class 9. That is why political leaders and social reformers like Jyotiba Phule, Gandhiji, B.R. Ambedkar, and Periyar Ramaswamy Naikar advocated and worked to establish a society in which caste inequalities are absent. Partly due to their efforts and partly due to other socio-economic changes, caste and caste system in modern India have undergone great changes. With economic development, large-scale urbanization, growth of literacy and education, occupational mobility, and the weakening of the position of landlords in the villages, the old notions of caste hierarchy are breaking down. Now, most of the times in urban areas, it does not matter much who is walking along next to us on a street or eating at the next table in a restaurant. The Constitution of India prohibited any caste-based discrimination and laid the foundations of policies to reverse the injustices of the caste system. If a person who lived a century ago were to return to India, she would be greatly surprised at the change that has come about in the country. Yet, caste has not disappeared from contemporary India. Some of the older aspects of caste have persisted. Even now, most people marry within their own caste or tribe. Untouchability has not ended completely, despite constitutional prohibition. Effects of centuries of disadvantages continue to be felt today. The caste groups that had access to education under the old system have done very well in acquiring modern education as well. Those groups that did not have access to education or were prohibited from acquiring it have naturally lagged behind. That is why there is a disproportionately large presence of upper caste among the urban middle classes in our country. Caste continues to be closely linked to economic status. Now, caste in politics. As in the case of communalism, casteism is rooted in the belief that caste is the sole basis of social community. According to this way of thinking, people belonging to the same caste and belong to a natural social community and have the same interest which they do not share with anyone from another caste. As we saw in the case of communalism, such a belief is not borne out by our experience. Caste is one aspect of our experience, but it is not the only relevant or the most important aspect. Caste can take various forms in politics. When parties choose candidates in elections, they keep in mind the caste composition of the electorate and nominate candidates from different castes so as to muster necessary support to win elections. When governments are formed, political parties usually take care their representatives of different castes and tribes find a place in it. Have a look at the glossary. Urbanization, shift of population from rural areas to urban areas. Occupational mobility, shift from one occupation to another, usually when a new generation takes up occupations other than those practiced by their ancestors. Caste hierarchy, a ladder-like formation in which all the caste groups are placed from the highest to the lowest caste. Next is the political parties and candidates in elections make appeals to caste sentiment to muster support. Some political parties are known to favor some caste and are seen as their representatives. Universal adult franchise and the principle of one person, one vote compelled political leaders to gear up to the task of mobilizing and securing political support. It also brought new consciousness among the people of caste that were hitherto treated as inferior and low. The focus on caste in politics can sometimes give an impression that elections are all about caste and nothing else. That is far from true. Just consider these. No parliamentary constituency in the country has a clear majority of one single caste. So every candidate and party needs to win the confidence of more than one caste and community to win elections. No party wins the votes of all the voters of a caste or community. When people say that a caste is a vote bank of one party, it usually means that a large proportion of the voters from that caste vote for that party. Many political parties may put up candidates from the same caste if that caste is believed to dominate the electorate in a particular constituency. Some voters have more than one candidate from their caste, while many voters have no candidate from their caste. The ruling party and the sitting MP or MLA frequently lose elections in our country. That could not have happened if all castes and communities were frozen in their political preferences. Clearly, while caste matters in electoral politics, so do many other factors. The voters have a strong attachment to political parties, which is often stronger than their attachment to their caste or community. People within the same caste or community have different interests depending on their economic condition. Rich and poor, or men and women from the same caste, often vote very differently. People's assessment of the performance of the government and the popularity rating of the leaders matter and are often decisive in elections. Now, politics in caste. We have so far looked at what caste is to politics, but it does not mean that there is only a one-way relation between caste and politics. Politics too influences the caste system and caste identities by bringing them into the political arena. Thus, it is not politics that gets caste ridden, it is the caste that gets politicized. This takes several forms. Each caste group tries to become bigger by incorporating within it neighboring caste or subcaste which were earlier excluded from it. Various caste groups are required to enter into a coalition with other caste or communities and thus enter into a dialogue and negotiation. New kinds of caste groups have come up in the political arena like backward and forward caste groups. Thus, caste plays different kinds of roles in politics. In some situations, the expression of caste differences in politics gives many disadvantaged communities the space to demand their share of power. In this sense, caste politics has helped people from Dalits and OBC caste to gain better access to decision making. Several political and non-political organizations have been demanding and agitating for an end to discrimination against particular caste, for more dignity and more access to land, resources and opportunities. At the same time, exclusive attention to caste can produce negative results as well. As in the case of religion, politics based on caste identity alone is not very healthy in a democracy. It can divert attention from other pressing issues like poverty, development and corruption. In some cases, caste division leads to tensions, conflict and even violence. So with this, our chapter ends, and in the next video, we will cover the next chapter. So till then, subscribe to the channel, listen to the audiobooks and study well. Thank you.